Dear brothers, dear friends, well, I'm very happy to be here again. I like to visit here, but now I'll have to say something. I don't know how well that's going to work. But the topic is the avatar and the illumined soul. There are two distinct types of spiritual teachers. They're the towering personalities, Sri Krishna, Lao Tzu, Buddha, Moses, Zoroaster, Jesus Christ, Muhammad. And then there are the millions of saints, seers, and sages. Generally speaking, the great spiritual leaders of the first rank belong to three grades. Those who are regarded by their followers as prophets, like Moses and Muhammad. Those who are regarded by their followers as messengers of God, like Lao Tzu and Zoroaster. And those who are worshipped as veritable incarnations of the divine, or avatars, by their followers. Sri Krishna, Jesus Christ, Buddha, Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ramachandra, Sri Chaitanya. The prophets, messengers of God, and avatars are distinct and far above the spiritual teachers who are saints, seers, and sages, realized, illumined souls. The prophets, the messengers, the great spiritual teachers, the avatars, come to earth at a critical stage. They establish a new spiritual order on the foundation of the old. The same timeless message is delivered according to the changing conditions of history and psychology. They restate the ancient message and are regarded as the saviors of humanity. They lead humanity to true light. They turn human hearts from the search for the temporal to the search for the eternal, which is no easy task because the eternal is not empirically obvious. It's something that requires a great deal of power to demonstrate and inspire people to seek the eternal when most of our experience doesn't even hint at its existence. Everything seems to be changing. They stress spiritual values first and foremost. Seek ye the kingdom of God, and all else shall be added unto you. In a sense, they're the product of the age that they live in. They reflect in their lives and teachings the then current human situation. But they also create the age. They're epoch makers. They give a new turn to the world. There's a vast difference in power between the two types. After the passing of the avatar, the incarnation, and also of the prophets and messengers of God, their power increases and their following expands. 2,000 years ago, Christ had 12 disciples. Now there are 1.2 billion people in the Catholic Church alone, not to mention the Orthodox churches and the Protestant denominations of Christianity. Sri Ramakrishna had Latu count up the number of his devotees. Think of it. Latu, who couldn't even learn the first letter of the alphabet, when tutored by God incarnate, he asked him to count the number of his devotees. Latu came up with 31. Now look, you see. The realized souls, after their passing, his or her influence gradually diminishes. It's just the opposite. Another vast difference between God-men and men of God. The avatar descends from above, divine grace coming down to the human plane. They come down without any past karma that they have to overcome, just a thin veil of Maya, enough to get them a body. The realized souls rise from below. From the human plane, they attain immortality. From the imperfect, they attain God realization. They attain perfection. The avatars, those great manifestations of God that are world teachers and world inspirers and world changers, are the best examples of their own teachings. They're the best demonstrations of the spiritual ideals and principles that they expound. The avatars are like ocean liners. The saints and sages are like rafts. You remember Huck Finn. He and Tom Sawyer constructed a raft on which they ran away and floated down the Mississippi, and they had to think twice and thrice whether they could add Jim to the two of them, whether the raft would take them down. It's kind of like that. The realization that comes to the illumined soul is extremely limited. It might not be that limited, but it's much. I mean, it's really hard to compare with that power that comes with the great teachers of the world. We can't think of a better God than the incarnations of God. We can't conceive of more all-embracing love, of more transcendental knowledge, of more unruffled peace, of more unalloyed joy than is manifest through their lives. If we want to see the best illustration of divine love, divine purity, divine joy, divine wisdom, divine freedom and peace, we find it in these great ones. He who has seen the Son has seen the Father. You have to see the Father through the Son, unless we are of the very small minority who can approach God through the path of knowledge directly to the impersonal absolute being. The intellect may somehow or other give us a vague picture of the impersonal aspect of divinity. But it is very difficult to align one's emotional nature with the impersonal. In order to move towards our spiritual ideal, our emotions must align with that spiritual ideal. The impersonal aspect of God won't respond to our adoration in the way that the personal aspect of God responds. And we always expect a response. We live in a world of reciprocity. Our love expects return. Those who are qualified to follow the path of knowledge directly don't expect that return on their love from Nirguna Brahman. It's called the peaceful path. Most people, if they realize Nirguna Brahman, they go first through the path of bhakti, or a path of bhakti mixed with jnana. Very few can approach Nirguna Brahman directly as Totapuri did. The percentage is low. That's why it's so important to study the lives of the avatars, to understand what spirituality really means, and to receive that inspiration for our own spiritual quest. We need tremendous energy. We need tremendous inspiration. And it's necessary to have that inspiration from that source, and for most of it, it's the avatar. There are those who think that they should study only the spiritual truths and not the biographies of the great spiritual teachers. It's much harder that way. much harder. The great ones become the bridge between the heart and the head. They gave the same message through their lives that is stated in the Upanishads, but in different terms. It's the motivational aspect of their lives that really moves us. The message is inner purity and true devotion to God. And it's not easy to recognize them face to face. How many people thought that Sri Ramakrishna was the mad Brahmin of Dakshineswar? How many people thought that Holy Mother was a simple village woman in Jairambati? How many of her peers in Jairambati who grew up with her recognized her, besides Aunt Banu? Sister Devamata, Laura Glenn, when she came to India, she had the privilege of associating with Holy Mother, and she put it so beautifully. Referring to Sri Sarada Devi, she said, her human covering is too thin to hide the radiance of divine consciousness beneath it. That was her experience. It's grace to recognize them in their own time. Some recognize the characteristics of their chosen ideal of God manifesting in the different great spiritual teachers of the world. And others don't unveil this masquerade and think that their chosen ideal is the only savior. The test of true devotion to one's own ideal is not identifying the Lord with his particular costume, with his particular physical manifestation. So there are two masquerade parties going on. One is the masquerade party of ordinary human beings, and the other is the masquerade party of the great spiritual teachers, the avatars. So let's deal with the first masquerade party. Suppose someone with great resources gave a masquerade party, say a Halloween party where people were expected to wear costumes, and they invited everyone. You have to use your imagination. Everyone, all human beings. And suppose everyone came. The two conditions. First of all, everyone has to wear a different costume. Now that's not too difficult, you see. We all have different costumes. Even identical twins with the same genotype have slightly different expressions in the phenotype and how those genes manifest. So everyone's got a different costume, different body-mind complex. And at the end of that great party, when the masquerade is unveiled, lo and behold, it's the same person underneath each costume. It's the same witnessing consciousness. It's the same conscious principle that coordinates the body-mind complex of each human being. Exactly the same, although each costume is unique. This is the human masquerade party, and we're all part of the party. It's called the Divine Leela. Now, what about the masquerade party of the great spiritual teachers, of the avatars? Sri Ramakrishna gives a hint. He said the avatar is like the searching for the right term, is like the break, it's like the defect in the wall of Maya. See, the wall of Maya is so high you can't get over it. It's so wide you can't get around it. It's so deep you can't get under it. But every once in a while there's a defect, a glaring defect in the wall of Maya. If the wall is also not just in space but in time, about every 500 years, there's this defect in the wall of Maya, and you can see right through it. Sometimes that defect is in the form of Buddha, sometimes it's in the form of Krishna, sometimes it's in the form of Christ. So the shape of that break in the wall is different. But on the other side of the wall of Maya is that divine spiritual reality. And the light shining through that form draws us to it, you see. From a distance, the forms are important. It's like the old construction sites when they put up a building downtown. This goes way back. They'd put up plywood on the sidewalk so you couldn't see what was going on. But it was cheap plywood, and there were always knotholes, and you could get your eye up to the knothole, and there's a whole other world over there, you see. See, people would be standing there watching the construction site. So the wall of Maya is the same way. Once you get up to the knothole, the shape of that knothole is not important. It's what's on the other side. See, we're attracted by the form, but when we get up there, it's the light that draws us, and through that manifestation in the shape of Christ or Buddha or Sri Ramakrishna or Krishna, we can walk through the wall of Maya to the other side. We get liberation. So if we're far away, the particular shape of that defect in the wall, that passageway, through which we attain liberation and the goal of our life, is important. But as we get up close, it's the divine light that draws us through. You see, that's one way of looking at it. So and Swami Vivekananda talks about it. And he's speaking to an American audience. So, as a prophet, he always, his duty is to talk to his audience and see their defects and tell them what they need to know, which is not always pleasant. So to this American audience, he was saying, it's absolutely necessary to worship God as man, and blessed are those cultures which have such a God-man to worship. Christians have such a God-man in Christ. Therefore, cling to Christ, never give him up. That is the natural way to see God in a human being. All our ideas of God are concentrated there. The great limitation of Christians is that they do not heed other manifestations besides Christ. He was a manifestation, so was Buddha. So were others, and there will be hundreds more. Don't limit God. Pay all the reverence you think is due to God, to Christ. That is the only worship we can have. The impersonal can't be worshipped. And then he quotes Krishna. Whenever virtue subsides and immorality prevails, I descend to help mankind. He says, fools, not knowing that I, the omnipotent and omnipresent God of the universe, have taken human form, deride me and think that it cannot be. When these great ones are thought of, Swamiji says, they manifest themselves in our souls, and they make us like unto them. Our whole nature changes, and we become like them. Now here's the secret. When those great manifestations of divine and human form are adored, they manifest themselves in our soul and make us like unto them. The penetration of light into the heart through our intense love of the avatar purifies the mind and heart, and we come like unto them. That's the process that draws us from our first recognition of that light coming through, the divine coming through the form, and into sympathy with that, into contemporaneousness with that incarnation, so that the distance diminishes and that divine light flows in and through us. Worship the chosen ideal with all your heart, but at the same time have due reverence for all the spiritual saviors of the world. This is what our Vedanta teaches. Steadiness in our own particular path with due reverence for others. And it won't do, as some try, to practice Hinduism a little bit, and then Islam a little bit, and then Christianity and Judaism in turn. It's like trying to dig a well without ever getting beyond 6 feet. You have to stay in the same place and keep digging in Sri Ramakrishna's parable. Swamiji says something else that's very interesting. The purpose and intent of what I have to say to you is this. I have found it possible in my life to worship all of the great teachers and to be ready for all that are yet to come. A mother recognizes her son in whatever clothing he may wear. And if she does not recognize him, I am sure she's not the mother of that son. Therefore, let us not only find God in Jesus of Nazareth, but in all the great ones. All the great ones that have preceded him, all that are to come, that came after him, and all that are yet to come. Our worship is unbounded and free. They are all manifestations of the infinite God. They are all pure and unselfish. They struggled and gave up their lives for us. They, each and all, suffer vicarious atonement for every one of us, and also for all that are to come after. Each of the avatars, each incarnation of God, suffers vicarious atonement for every one of us, and also for all that are to come hereafter. Through their grace, we don't have to carry all of our own burden. And he's also saying, in another way, that they're not different. Because if each avatar suffers vicarious atonement for the salvation or liberation of each human being now and each that is to come, that's infinite. So they're each infinite and they're not different. The great service that the avatars give is that they draw our attention to the unchanging spiritual laws in this ever-changing world. These are truths that don't become obsolete. They're ever ancient and they're ever new. It's a matter of connecting it with the particular situation in which people find themselves. Now, from the other side, from the human standpoint, we are all men and women of God, but for the most part are unaware of it. We become men and women of God when we recognize God, when we accept God, and when we accept God as the very goal and ideal of life. And then when we really reach God and find our eternal relationship with him, then we become men and women of God in the true sense. These days, it's our common experience to establish our relationship with family, with society, with nation, with wealth, with body, and to forget God altogether. The nuns are in ascendance, you see. They have no religious affiliation whatsoever. See, Atheism is what is much better. We're in an age of indifference now, where it doesn't matter to a rising number of people whether God exists or not, whether religion is true or not. It's just irrelevant. That's very unusual, historically. So we establish our relationship with all temporary things. The truth is that the position is reversed. In truth, He is our only Father because every other relationship is temporary. Normal relationships are like talking to the person next to you on the airplane. It's over when the ride ends. It's nice to have a family reunion on holidays and everyone gets together and we have a festive time. That's good for now, but we would probably not like it for eternity. There's a relationship between the individual soul and the Supreme Being. And this relationship is eternal and must be discovered, recognized. And in this is the fulfillment of our dream of eternal life and the fulfillment of our dream of absolute peace and blessedness. This is the lesson that the great spiritual teachers, the avatars, deliver to us. Those who follow this teaching and realize God experience their essential unity with divinity. They become realized souls. Then they don't identify themselves with any particular country or race. They live in this world and still they are above this world. They're super social. Their love for humanity becomes a phase of their love for God. Their love for society and family becomes a phase for their love of the divine being. It doesn't mean that they're indifferent to the world. They have love for the world. But that love is another phase of their love for the Supreme Being who enfolds all. So that is one type of realized soul. It's the type of realized soul that realizes God, and after realizing God, lives in this world as a free soul and interacts with people in this different light and becomes a teacher. Having no desires himself or herself, they live and teach through the example of their lives, and also, if they're inclined, through what they tell people. Okay, that's the Jivan Mukta. Now there are three classes, generally speaking, of realized souls. We'll talk about the Jivan Mukta Purush first. This is Swami Saradananda's analysis. When a spiritual aspirant's desires come to an end, with the help of one-pointed intellect, with the help of firm faith and single-minded devotion, that spiritual seeker is about to be united with God. But at that time, for some inscrutable reason, pure desires arise in the minds of some spiritual seekers, such as, I will do good to humanity, I will work for the happiness of many. Under the influence of such desires, they can't remain completely in the non-dual state. They descend a little bit from that high spiritual plane and again enter the domain of I and mine. But that I is now constantly connected with the divine, as I am God's servant, I am God's child, I am a part of God. That I knows that God's is one's all in all and never turns back to the world. So that's the soul who's liberated in life. And the ordinary Jivan Mukta, the ordinary person, statistically, this is much more prevalent. The ordinary person realizes God and leaves the body. That's it. Usually realizes God as they're passing out of the body. There's another group of students, spiritual aspirants, who after achieving the non-dual experience don't return to do good to humanity, either in this life or the next. They're like the men in Sri Ramakrishna's parable who hear the riotous party on the other side of the wall and climb the wall and see what's going on the other side and say, "Ha ha!" and jump over, never to be seen again. And the Jivan Mukta gets up there and sees what's going on and thinks, "Wow, what a riotous party. I got to tell my friends. They won't believe this." So, but what happens at that point when you're about to merge into the infinite is inscrutable. For some inscrutable reason, some souls have this desire, no, I'll back off. Let me go back and that they don't want liberation just for themselves. They want to help other people achieve it. Okay. And then there's another class of realized souls who are born endowed with a special relationship with God and never become entangled with Maya as ordinary human beings do, and are called Ishvara Kotis. The Ishvara Kotis are like the avatar in that they come with a particular divine mission. Their mission is less extensive than the avatars. The Ishvara Kotis, and then remember Sri Ramakrishna identified 5 among his direct disciples as Ishvara Kotis. They're the reserve force of the divinity. They develop the seed forces that are of the truths that the avatar leaves. God has this reserve force, and out of that reserve force he draws his apostles. Sri Ramakrishna gives a vivid picture, actually, of how he drew Narendra down to the area beyond the form where Sri Ramakrishna found the 7 sages, and he drew one of them, Narendra, down to earth by his sweet nature. He got him out of this deep samadhi, and the sage kind of nodded his assent. So this is what's going on. There's the reserve force. They're waiting, but they're called down in this way. And these Ishvara Kotis, from their childhood, they seek God. When Swami Premananda was 5 years old, he was a very handsome little boy and precocious, and everyone loved him. And one of the ladies said, "Oh, we're going to get you a nice bride." And he says, "I'll die if I'm married." At 5 years old, he knew. As soon as Christ saw the fishermen, he recognized them as his apostles. He did not make them fishers of men. They were chosen, they were earmarked by the divinity for that purpose, and they took embodiment to fulfill that purpose. In the life of Sri Ramakrishna, he recognized at first glance Narendra, Rakal, Sashi, Sharat. On the first day that Sashi and Sharat came to Sri Ramakrishna, he had someone read the Bible. They came with other friends. The other friends got nervous. "What's going on here? We don't like this." He says, "I'm talking to them." They were cousins, I think. And it was where Christ is talking about monastic life, and some people are suited for it and some people aren't, and Sashi and Sarat's friends were getting nervous with this talk, but he meant it for them. And these words were coming from Christ, and he recognized them immediately as part of his reserve force who had come previously with Christ. The Ishwara Kodis come with the avatar to assist in his work. They develop the seed forces of the message that the avatar lead. It's another realm. It's nice to think about it. You can kind of get lost in it. So when Swami Yogananda was dying, there was this tug of war going on. He wasn't just slipping away. And Girish Ghosh came and started talking to him. Yogananda didn't want to come back again. And Girish Ghosh talked to him and said, well, he says, look, he said, you've got to give up. It's not your choice. He said, you've got to give up. It's not your choice. He was an Ishwara Koti. He was going to be in the reserve force whether he liked it or not. He'd come with Sri Krishna. He came with Ramakrishna. And he's leaving this body, and he'll be in the reserve force again. Swami Sardananda narrates an incident that illustrates how the Ishwara Koti in Ramakrishna's incarnation develops the spiritual truths that are left in seed form by the avatar into something that the rest of us can understand and practice. So this is from the Lila Prasanga. Sometime in 1884, a friend of ours came to Dakshineswar and found the master sitting in his room surrounded by the devotees. Narendra was also present. Well, this is a literary technique. The friend of ours that's going to narrate this eyewitness account is the author of the book. It's Swami Sardananda. M did this also in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. A devotee asked, if you read carefully, there are lots of places when you realize, well, that must be M. He's just hiding himself or trying to. So this is an eyewitness report from Swami Sardananda himself. Found the master sitting in his room surrounded by the devotees. Narendra was also present. There arose the topic of the Vaishnava religion. The master said, that doctrine teaches that one should always be careful to observe three things: a taste for God's name, japa, compassion to all beings, and serving God's devotees. Knowing the non-difference between God's name and God, one should always take his name with love and devotion. Knowing the identity between the devotee and the divine, between Krishna and the Vaishnava, one should always respect, worship, and salute holy men, the devotees. And one should have the conviction in one's heart that the whole universe belongs to Krishna. Therefore, compassion to all beings. No sooner had the master uttered the words compassion to all beings than he went into samadhi. Regaining partial external consciousness in a short time, he continued, compassion for beings. What will you, clever animals, bestow compassion on other human beings? You wretch, who are you to bestow it? No, not compassion to human beings, not compassion to jivas, but service to them as Shiva. Serve human beings as manifestations of God. This was not an elaborated teaching. It was a short sentence. Sardananda continues. It was Narendranath alone who, coming out of the room at the end of the master's samadhi, said, "What wonderful light have I got today from Sri Ramakrishna's words." In synthesizing the Vedantic knowledge, the non-dual knowledge, which is generally regarded as dry, austere, even cruel, with the sweet devotion to the Lord, what a new sweet means of experiencing truth he has revealed. In order to attain the non-dual knowledge, one should renounce the company of men altogether, retire into the forest, and mercilessly uproot and throw off all love, devotion, and other soft, tender emotions from the heart. Formerly, when the sadhaka used to try to attain that knowledge, he used to regard the whole universe and each person in it as obstacles to the path to Nirguna Brahman. But from what the Master said today in Bhava Samadhi, it is gathered that the Vedanta of the forest can be applied in practice to the workaday world. Let us do everything we're doing, there's no harm in it. First, be fully convinced that it is God that exists manifested before us, as the universe and all beings in it. So this is the first condition for practicing the worship of God and human beings. First, be fully convinced that it is God, that divine, all-pervading, infinite reality that exists manifested before us as the universe and all beings. So from the standpoint of reason, from the standpoint of the testimony from the scriptures and the sages, and from our own spiritual practice, have a working understanding and faith in the non-dual truths that this universe is the divine in disguise. And that because our minds are distracted, because our minds are kind of tossed about in waves all the time, distracted and agitated, we experience the infinite, the undivided, and the unchanging as all these little finite changing things and beings. As far as we can have a working faith that that's the truth, doesn't mean we realize it, but it means that we've thought about it very deeply and there's a conviction there and a working faith. Those with whom he comes in contact every moment in his life, whom he loves, respects, and honors, to whom his sympathy and kindness flow, are all parts of that infinite divinity, are all he himself. If the spiritual seeker can look upon all the persons of the world as Shiva, how can there be an occasion for that person to see himself as, or feel himself as superior to anyone, or to cherish anger and hatred for anyone, or have an arrogant attitude, or even have the egotism of kindness, as if he were above them? Thus, serving the jivas as Shiva, he will have his heart purified and be convinced in a short time that he himself is also a part of God, the eternally pure, awake, and free, and bliss absolute and infinite. What a great light on the path of devotion we get from those words of the Master. Until he sees God in all beings, the sadhaka has not the remotest chance of realizing true transcendental devotion. If the devout sadhaka serves the jivas as Shiva, he will see God in all, attain true devotion, and have the aim of his life fulfilled in a short time. Right away, he saw this sentence of the Master as a shortcut to God in a secular age, in an age where we're much too busy and distracted to go through the old rituals that take a lot of time. He immediately saw this as the path for this age for most people. Those sadhakas who adopt the yoga of action or the royal road to the realization of God will also get great light from those words. As embodied beings can never rest for a moment without working, it goes without saying that that it is only the work of service of jivas as Shiva that should be performed, and action done in that spirit will enable us to reach the goal sooner than otherwise. If the Divine Lord ever grants me an opportunity, said Naran, I will proclaim everywhere in the world this wonderful truth I've heard today. I'll preach this truth to the learned and the ignorant, to the rich and the poor, to the brahmanas and the chandalas, which he did. The extraordinary master, that's an end quote from Vivekananda, and then Saradananda resumes with the narrative. The extraordinary master, that is Sri Ramakrishna, always entered the realm of samadhi in this way and constantly brought wonderful light regarding knowledge, devotion, yoga, and karma back to us to illumine the path of human life. So the role of the avatar as an epic maker comes from the realm of samadhi, the realm to which they're tuned naturally and which is foreign to most of us. The realm of samadhi is beyond words. And the Ishwara Kodis act as interpreters to bring that insight, that little sentence of the Master, in this instant, into the realm of ordinary human understanding and to find practical ways to implement that insight. Saradananda says, we could not then comprehend the implication of the Master's words. It was the supremely intelligent Narendranath who understood those divine words, as far as it was humanly possible to do so, and expressed from time to time their sublime significance to our amazement. You see? The avatar needs a reserve force. He needs these extraordinarily spiritual and intelligent people as interpreters for the rest of us, so that his teachings don't get lost. So someone has to understand them. Somehow they have to get implemented. And even among the Ishwara Kodis that came with Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Yogananda, who was an Ishwara Kodi, Swami Premananda, who was an Ishwara Kodi, they doubted this path of service to God and man that Narendra was just full of when he came back from the West. We've got to start, serving people. We've got to serve the people with cholera, and we've got to start all these activities. And Swami Premananda got sick at one time. I forgot whether he had cholera, might have been cholera. And he was sidelined for a while. And he decided when that happened, he was going to read the then extant works of Swami Vivekananda. He went through the whole corpus while he was ill. And he came out of that and he said, it's not possible to understand Sri Ramakrishna without going through Swamiji. You have to study. You have to understand Swamiji in order to understand Sri Ramakrishna. And he himself was the personal attendant that Sri Ramakrishna brought to him. He says, I have to have you. When I get into samadhi and you touch me, it won't have any effect. Other people, I'll get pain. It'll be uncomfortable. So think of it, that Swami Vivekananda had to work with these other extraordinarily spiritual and intelligent human beings that had brought to earth to help the avatar in order for them to come on board with this, which they did, of course. Swami Brahmananda never gave him any trouble. He understood it right away. They were pretty much on par in terms of their understanding. So I'm talking a lot about Sri Ramakrishna when the topic is avatar, but we know so much about him, the illustrations are a little easier to come by. Now, I want to talk about another feature of the avatar. Again, this is Swami Saradananda. In the spiritual world, those great teachers who have modeled extraordinary and entirely new ways of living are worshipped by people as incarnations or avatars of God. Avatars discover new doctrines and new paths in the religious world, and they transmit spiritual powers by a mere touch. Their minds are never attracted to lust and gold, and as we study their lives, we understand that they were born to show others the way. Neither personal enjoyment nor liberation is the goal of their lives. Personal enjoyment is artha and kama, and liberation is moksha. So dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So artha, kama, and moksha is not the goal of their lives. Their intense sympathy and love for suffering humanity induce them to work and discover ways to remove misery. They don't they're not bound. They're pure from the outset, so they're not attracted to personal enjoyment. And moksha comes to them so easily. That's really not why they're here. They come to help suffering humanity. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. That's for human beings, and they're not. They only have our form. You see? That's the covering. And other than that, it's just this divine consciousness that's working through a human form. Sri Ramakrishna used to test his disciples. Sometimes, unexpectedly, he'd say, "What do you think of me?" When he said this to Yogan, who became Swami Yogananda, Yogan said, "Sir, you are neither a householder nor a monk." So Ramakrishna's reply is, "How do you know such a truth?" In an indirect way, he's saying, you're not a human being. He saw him as he was. So let's tie this up. What distinguishes the avatar from the realized soul? The realized soul discovers his or her own bondage at some point and switches from the path of pleasure to the quest for liberation, eventually realizing God. Most realized souls reach perfection by following the path chalked out by the avatar. For the avatar, neither personal enjoyment nor liberation is the goal. Their intense sympathy and love for humanity induces them to take embodiment and discover the ways to approach God according to the need of the time. They're epic makers. 2, ordinary souls have to overcome past samskaras from previous lives in order to realize God. The avatar is born without past samskara. 3, after leaving the body, the influence of the realized soul to inspire people to realize God gradually diminishes. After passing away, after the passing of the avatar and also the prophets and messengers of God, their power increases and their following expands. 4, once a jiva becomes free from bondage and experiences the supreme bliss of samadhi, that person does not want to return to this world for any reason whatsoever. They jump over the wall. When the avatar attains that bliss, they think of ways to share it with others. After realizing God, the jiva is released from karma and all duty. But when the avatar has that experience, when they become established, as Ramakrishna did in Bhava Samadhi, they understand the specific purpose of their human birth and set out on their missions. And as a rule, until their specific tasks are accomplished, they're eager to live in this world and work for that end. 5, A realized soul may suffer some physical discomfort when shouldering the responsibility for a disciple at the time of initiation. Each avatar, in Swami Vivekananda's word, suffers vicarious atonement for every one of us, and also for all that are to come hereafter. A human being struggles for freedom and follows the path chalked out by the avatar and becomes a realized soul. The avatar awakens the cosmic kundalini, and the realized soul comes along for the ride. Now, what does that mean? The avatar awakens the cosmic kundalini, and the realized soul comes along for the ride. Let's examine it a little and then close. The avatar awakens the cosmic kundalini is a statement made by Swami Brahmananda when he was exhorting the monks in his training to spiritual practice. The practical import is you're in close time proximity to Sri Ramakrishna's life. If you exert yourselves in spiritual practice now, you will find it much easier to realize God than if you were far away in time from his life. His power was still present at that time, manifesting in Swami Brahmananda, the direct disciples. It's like Sri Ramakrishna recruited generals, and the generals recruited colonels, and on down the line. See, the closer you are to that original spiritual wave, the more powerful it is. And he says, with less effort, you'll be able to approach the divine. So do it now. Don't wait till your next life. On a subtle level, Sri Ramakrishna opened up new channels to God realization through his spiritual austerities and realizations, and those channels are wide open. The snow's been plowed, the salt's been put down. All we have to do is exert ourselves to become pure and subtle, and we have access to those open roads to God. The illumined soul goes along or comes along for the ride. Now, what does that mean? That sounds too easy. Does the illumined soul put her thumb out and get picked up by the car driven by the avatar and carried comfortably in a heated leather seat to full realization? Or does the potential realized soul jump onto the moving footboard of a crowded Calcutta bus and grab the post between two open windows, holding on for dear life? Maybe. But I want to leave you with a different illustration. Near the St. Louis Center, it's our walking path. Swami Agyanananda and Swami Brahmarupananda may remember. It's the path that we walk on normally when we don't go into the park across the street. So Wydown Boulevard is really the prettiest boulevard in St. Louis. It's a divided road, and the median's quite wide, and there are nice houses on both sides. And it's 2 miles with one stoplight at 1 mile and then another stoplight. And it's a 2-lane road with 1 lane of traffic. So there's a parking lane, which generally isn't parked on, and a biking lane. And especially on the weekends, it is a great place for people on bicycles. You know, if you're walking there on a Sunday morning fairly early, you'll hear the whir and the sound of one of these places that sell bicycles. They have bicycle rider clubs, people that are really good that, ride 30 miles every morning. So there'll be a bunch of these semi-professional bicycle riders out. And you can hear, they're coming so fast that it's like you can hear, it's like a wind coming from the other side of the hill. You can hear them before you see them. And then they'll come towards you in a kind of a V shape. And then they'll go all across the road, all 2 lanes. And the lead rider is facing the full resistance of the wind, and then it kind of fans out like geese. And that's how they ride. And they'll come down, Y down, to Skinker, where our ashram is. And then they'll turn around, they'll go up again. So that's 4 miles, and then they'll come down again. So sometimes they'll go 6 miles, sometimes they'll go 8 miles. And they move so fast that if you're walking, you might hear them twice. You'll hear that sound coming towards you, then that sound going away from you, and that sound coming back towards you. Now, the wind resistance is what slows you up on a bicycle when you get good at it, when you have strong muscles and you're in shape. And the lead rider has to be very strong. And it's always shifting. You know, the lead rider will stay there for a while and just wear himself out, and then the next guy will come up and they'll take turns. But everyone in the front row is facing the wind. But in the back, they call this a peloton. In the back of the peloton, in the middle of the pack, if you can keep up with these really strong riders in the front, you save 40% of your energy to move at that speed. So let's think of the peloton. The avatar is the lead rider, and the lead rider doesn't change. It's always the avatar. And his direct disciples are that front edge of the V, and their disciples are behind that. And the devotees are in the middle of the peloton. Now, what's their job? It's not like just sitting there in the fancy leather seat that's heated. They got to work hard. They got to pedal fast. They have to be in shape. What does that mean? They have to do their spiritual practice. We have to do our spiritual practice. We have to live our lives so that we can do our spiritual practice, and we have to work hard. And we have to pay attention. We have to be careful, because if our front wheel hits the back wheel of the bike in front of us, we might not make it. We might fall out of formation. We have to move fast enough to stay behind the avatar so that we can draft and be pulled along and save 40% of our energy. But if we do that, then that grace of the avatar, with less effort, we reach the goal.
Well, great thanks to Swami Nishpapananda for such a beautiful talk. And we wish he were staying longer. We'll actually be leaving this afternoon, so there won't be any chance for a satsang tonight. But we're very happy that he could come. Hope that he can come many, many more times. And we will have a beautiful message that we can take home with us today. So we're very happy about that. Just a few things. Most of you know that yesterday was the beginning of our Navaratri period, Mahalaya. Those who haven't signed up for the chanting and are still interested will just have to make up for one day, because we were supposed to have started yesterday. How many people are signed up? Did everybody do it yesterday? Okay. So if you still want to sign up, it's okay. The sign-up sheet is out there, and just do an extra one day, and then you'll be all caught up. And this is all leading up to, of course, our Durga Puja celebration, which will be next Sunday. And do we need volunteers for anything? Did Rinadi say anything? Generally, Saturday morning, people will come and help cutting vegetables and doing things like that. And so we may need a little extra help for our Karma Yoga Saturday morning. So that will be next Sunday on the 6th, starting at 11 o'clock. So we thank you all for coming. We invite you for refreshments in the basement. You have a chance to talk to Swami Nishpapananda for a little bit, and hope to see all of you for our Durga Puja celebration. Any other announcements?